if you're speaking about it, better for people is to live in the small villages, for example, small towns. How do you think what can offer a big, large city to people?
I guess the difference between small cities and big cities is the relationship to, let's say, the countryside. If people are related in their work or in their passion to countryside, to have greeneries, to build vegetables or to have cattle, let's say, they are in this kind of industry, I can imagine they like to live in villages. But if you have a job in the city, economical, depending on cities, or on transport, I think it's better to, well, I suppose it's better to live in cities because you're close to transport possibilities. Could be airport, could be train, could be cars, could be bikes. And if you're living next to these bikes or this way of transport is better. That's why I think the solution for COVID is also to dense the cities more instead of less. It could be small cities, it could be big cities, but try to dense them. Could be a policy for the future to because, and that's why I call it a city of villages. You can divide the city into different parts. Like for instance, Eindhoven in 1920, so more than, let's say, 100 years ago, the city of Eindhoven was pretty small, 40,000 people. Not a small city, but because of the growing industry of Philips, the city decided to connect 5 surrounding villages. And they set a contract for this, they wrote a contract, so it became a big city. A small city with 5 villages as a whole city, a new city. And that saved, let's say, not only the industry of Philips, but it was, Philips was the growing engine, let's say, for the city. Because of the growing industry of Philips, the city expanded. But it was possible because those 5 villages were also expanding. And but it's still recognizable, those villages. I live in one of those villages. I lived in one of them, and I didn't want to live in one of the other villages. So it still has kept the identity of that part of the city. So Stratum, for instance, is the village I lived in. Used to be a village. But to have this kind of own identity of that part of the city could help you to feel at home, but also to have to recognize people, to be part of a community. So you are part of the big city community, 250,000 people, but you're also part of the small community, the former village, 50,000 people. So the idea of communities is very important.
And the question of Sergey is about the new architecture of Eindhoven. Can it be an example how to create a new way of city for other cities in the world?
I guess it
Not
can.
only in the world.
No, I guess it can be an example indeed, because, but to be honest, we used to be the ugliest city in the Netherlands.
Yes, this was a long time
Yeah.
ago. But
No,
what
it's
about
30
now?
years ago, but we changed this identity because of the solutions we brought in. So, but we were more or less free because we had no history at all. If you go to another city with a lot of history, like Den Bosch or Breda in the Netherlands, they have a lot of historical monuments in the city that you should preserve. And then it's more difficult to, for instance, to build skyscrapers or high-rise buildings. You should find a policy where to do this. In Eindhoven, I said you shouldn't do this in one of these former villages, not inside the village. Kept them as they are, but because we were transforming the former factory sites of Philips, they used to be factories, so it's sort of an outside the village. But I said, if you want to transform these former industrial buildings into something new, you can create a completely new village. So this stripe S, where you have been, this whole stripe zone, 5 huge sites of factories, because of the loss of this industry, I said we have to build here a new kind of city, not a village city, but well, maybe a very condensed skyscraper city in a way. So this new city, this 6th part of the city. No industry anymore, but a new city for housing, for living.
In the same areas and
in Stripe, the whole zone of Stripe. You have now a lot of high-rise buildings. You saw, as I said, I gave you pictures.
Yes.
And that's the new identity of this part of the city. So we added, besides these 5 former villages, we added another village, the condensed, the high-rise city part, and it's very popular, especially among young people, because you have this typical way of living, like living in lofts for factories, but you also have new apartments built, and that's also comfortable, of course. So there's a beautiful mix with a new identity that we didn't have before.
But is it important for architects who decided to create a new identity, a new way of life, to use the buildings that have already been there in this site?
I think it is, because I think you shouldn't, what we did in the past, as urban planners, we demolished, for instance, the industry, because the industry went out, so we wanted to demolish it and have an empty site to build some new houses. I say, don't do this. Try to analyze before. The first step should be analyzing the existing situation and try to find out if there are what I call pearls, beautiful parts of this site to preserve or to reuse, not as a monument, not protect it, but try to feel free to reuse it in a way that you like to do this. So feel free as a designer to reuse it, because to reuse something, it's keeping the soul in that part of the city. I call it the soul, because it remembers you about the past, but it also gives you the opportunity to build something new.
Yes, it's better to demolish
Exactly.
everything.
Yeah.
And just
It should be forbidden to demolish it all.
it's easier way.
And that could be the message to other cities too.
And about the new project of Stefano Boeri in Eindhoven, do you think that it's a very Dutch one, and maybe some Dutch architect can create the same building as well?
I guess the Dutch architect can do this, but then it's about copying. I think what we did is bringing some ingredients from outside. Like you have a meal, you create a meal, and you bring in some ingredients from different parts of the world, like pepper and salt. You know, these kind of ingredients to get a better taste, a new taste. To taste the city like a new composition in a way. So
beautiful to say.
Yeah, you can compare it with creating a meal, like a cook. I feel myself sometimes a cook in the city.
You know, that's true. Yes.
Yeah, and you can bring in ingredients, so we have a very good, tasteful dinner. And it's also with respect to the architects from outside. I was able to, in the year 2000, we had a competition. I was able to work with Peter Eisen from New York 5. And, it was amazing to see and to work with him, because I was more or less the connector between him and a few talented students and architects, to do a small competition for the station area. But it was so inspiring to work with him, because he brought in ideas from his life, let's say, from his career. And it was amazing to see. So it was only about inspiration, and but the students or the architects were able to translate it into, let's say, our language.
We spoke a lot with Danish architects in Denmark, and they said that not so long time ago, they were oriented and they saw how Dutch people make the architecture, and they decided that Dutch architects is the best in the world, and they want to be something similar like that. This was an example for them.
Okay.
And maybe it was in в каких годах это было? In what,
В 80-х, 90-х.
80, 90 years.
Yeah.
So it's not so far away. It's 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And how can it be that in that period the Dutch architect was something unique, was the best in the world about architecture?
Well,
Because now maybe
yeah.
Danish architecture is very popular. Maybe say some gold period of architecture you can say now. But just some time ago they said that Dutch people was the best. We spoke with Muller,
Yeah.
CF Muller's
Architect.
some studio in Aarhus. We were in their office and they talked about it. They were
Okay.
young and they were sitting and decided how can we be better than Dutch.
Okay. Well, it's nice to hear. But I think what happened is more related to maybe even my generation, because it's in my story too. When I started the study in 1968, we had this cultural revolution in Europe. This Woodstock festival. And Woodstock was more or less, it was just a festival, but it was also a sign of the time that people wanted to change. It was not about fitting into these regular life anymore, but feel freedom, let's say. So it changed, the world changed into a sort of chaotic situation. People want to be free, it was about sexual freedom, it was about freedom of choice, selection, elections also. But at that time I started to study, so my first year was still old-fashioned architectural way, doing practice on different types. It was well organized, well structured, in a new part of the university. Only two years existing at that time, the Faculty of Architecture, Urban Design. But then during this year of Woodstock, let's say, there was a protest from students against the system of education. So professors were sent home during exams. I was doing an exam and all the students came inside and they said, go home, you get here, you get something, a sort of a present from us, because this is what you should do. You should focus on your own interest. You should study on your own interest. You should develop your own skills. That was the message at the time. And it was related to this, that's why we are called protest generation. We started to change, so in 1970, we had to create our own education. Can you imagine? There were no professors at all. All year students, 1 or 2 years older than I was, they became my tutors, not professors, but my tutors, my tutors. And I could follow people that I liked, or from whom I liked the idea about the profession, let's say.
And were they the same, almost the same years?
Yeah. 1 or 2 years older than I was, so it was. We created them ourselves, so we found out other students that wanted to do the same, so we created sort of islands or communities, let's say, to study together. But it's amazing to see that we like to develop our own education, follow our passion in why we want to become an architect. And that's created a beautiful atmosphere about finding your own way. And for instance, I studied together with Jo Koenen. Maybe you heard about him. He's a famous Dutch architect. He built this small haven territory where I live now. So we studied together in the first atelier, the first day. We both remember what we were doing, drawing and presenting the next day. So we know each other from that moment on. The first hour, let's say, in studying together. And later on, I also worked with him. But he became famous because he was very energetic, 24/7 into architecture. That's it. And more of those people, became more or less well known. So he became a new, young professor, let's say. And he was also leading, not knowing that at that time, the idea of this kind of change in profession. And he became a famous Dutch architect, but his students, his former students, also became very famous. So you can see that this kind of change in profession, it started as I see it now, because of this cultural change movements in the end of the 60s, and it created a new generation. So they started in the 70s, graduating in the 75 to 80s, and then starting off their own profession, their own offices in the beginning of the 80s. And I guess that created a new generation of very creative, independent, crazy, out of the box architects. And I guess that's the identity of what happened.
In the time, it's something similar.
Yeah.
80.
Yeah, and yeah.
It can be.
Yeah, I guess it could be the cause of this change of identity.
And about your entering to the Ukraine,
Yeah.
here. What do you think about the development of our cities?
Well, I see a lot of skyscrapers here. I see a lot of glass buildings, and it's still people are commenting on this, and I can imagine that. But it's still the actual situation, and you have to deal with it. But what you try to change is what you do now, writing about it. The two of you. You are the seeds, what I call you, the seeds for the future.
Yeah, so some small.
Yeah, but you have a lot of seeds, because yesterday we had also this event. It was organized. It was about talking about money, talking about investment, talking about profit, and I was the only one talking about people, talking about feelings, talking about emotion, maybe even. But it's about awareness. Let's say there's a new mayor, and I suppose he is aware of this kind of new energy in cities. If you are able, he ended his speech with the fact that he would like to gather people to get them involved in change of the city. And my story is about my personal involvement, how it started 40 years ago, being a citizen and starting with, at my own front door to work together with my neighbors to start up a maintenance fund. So to paint the house white together instead of independent.
Yeah,
and that's a small step, but an important step to create a community or be aware of being a community. And what this mayor talked about was not only necktie people from building companies and banking organizations to build the city, but also to create seeds in the city of change, that people feel connected again to policy, because now there's a big distance between the mayor and the people. And he is a guy, I guess he wants to get it near. He wants to invite citizens to know more, to get more involved in the city.
Where was he from?
The mayor of Kiev. Yeah, yesterday.
This one?
Yeah, but he ended up with,
Do you believe him?
I don't know, because he was also told me two things. First of all, he would like to get closer to the people, the city.
This high one.
Yeah, this high one, this strong one, and he wants to be the guider of the investments in it. If people.
When?
Sorry?
It's when?
Oh.
Спасибо.
He wants to protect people. Sorry?
Do you need sugar?
No. He told, because he is such a strong guy, he would be the guy outside of the bar to protect people from inside the bar if they want to have fun. How do you call it in English? A bodybuilder outside the building to protect, let's say. And of course, it's his power, his identity to be strong and to protect the city, let's say, and the citizens. And that was his message. But I can imagine it's okay, because it's something from his DNA that he can bring in. Okay. But for me, what it was the most important thing is that he announced that he wanted to be close to the people.
Oh, I don't believe you.
Well, I always like to see the glass is half full, let's say, between these skyscrapers, but have this cozy place for coffee. And coffee is a key word for joy and living in the city. And so it's getting on in Kiev too. But you need time. Like did needed time in Eindhoven to change. And the only thing is that we had this crisis. People lost their jobs, empty factories. There was a critical moment in history of our city, but it was a beautiful moment in a way because it was something very negative, but we were forced to change.
Many stress.
Yeah, and that's important that we were forced. You are not forced to change here. The only thing is that people are offending against skyscrapers that they don't like, glass buildings, but there is no real need to change. And it's not so easy. I guess the only thing is what happened yesterday, that I was able to try to convince people, try to inspire people that were there, the real builders, the real investors, maybe the best place to try to bring in some seats to the heads of these people. So that's why I love to come. To hope to change, to inspire them they start to think, they maybe invite some young people to join in teams together with the architects that they normally build these glass palaces, to bring in some new ideas also from these young people. I hope so. But I'm from this glass is half full. That's my opinion.
I don't know about the next question. It's so difficult. Maybe do you know a good example of this?
What I just told you. This it's a small example. It's not real.
It's a food market.
Yeah. This market, this food market. For me, it's a beautiful place. One of those pearls that I talked about. The pearl in the city for me is this food market, because it's a guy who is aware of the beauty and the value of an old building. He sees it and he said, I like this building very much. It's empty, I can buy it and I can create something, but not about architecture itself, although it's interior architecture in a way. But it's a very good project to me for a new way of life, maybe also in Ukraine, I hope so.
And we also have a lot of disputes about the architecture of Soviet Union here in Ukraine.
Well, I love those buildings. I'm part of this group from Ukraine, from Kiev, about modernism.
Soviet Union.
Same modernism.
Same Soviet Union.
Yes, I think it's so valuable for the city. If you're talking about good architecture, I think it's about to be respectful to this kind of monuments, but you shouldn't treat it as to protect it as a monument, but feel free to add something more, but see this as the soul of the city, part of the identity, and you can add something new around it, but try to reflect on this way of architecture, maybe add something new, not copy it, but like brother and sister, let's say. Like one family should be in an ensemble, like I did in Eindhoven. I showed some examples about even it can contrast, let's say, it can be contrast between a modernistic building and something new built besides. But if you do this on purpose, to build something that's completely different, it can also add some new value. Like the bride, when she's getting married, you take a picture of her in front of an old shed with all the rooms. Because the contrast makes the bride more beautiful and the shed older. This contrast can help to show the value of what you like to show.
It's now very popular in Kyiv. The new complexes, living complexes with their own territory, with some own infrastructure, parks,
space, let's say.
Yes. And it's like sitting inside the other city.
Okay.
It's the same idea. This is about the
Village in the city.
Yes.
I like it. Yeah.
It's the way. This way.
I guess it's a good way, yeah, because you create a community, and community. Of course, you have your own cells to live in, private cells. But if you go outside, sometimes even inside, I guess in Ukraine and Russia, you have some inside places together. But outside could be very important. When you meet people, if you have children go to play, as parents sit next to the children, they start to talk, or older people, if there's some place where you can get the coffee, could be very modest, very simple. You can sit and have a coffee like we do here now, and you can meet other people, you can start to talk with other people, so that's a place to meet. And these places to meet are so important on a smaller scale. It creates this community, this village in the city.
But if we speak about the public places nearby to living, residential one, and need they be closed for other people?
Sometimes. No, sometimes. For instance, in the place where I live, we have a very small park. If you come, next time I'll show you. And at night it is closed. And during the day you can pass.
For night
It's a good solution because it should be protected from people that want to demolish or make
it's a lot of people.
noise or things like that. So it could be a very good solution to protect it during the night, and during the day it should be open.
Because, for example, if you speak about Ukraine, it's all these public spaces are just for the residents who live there, and it costs all the time.
All the day?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's just the part of public spaces of the people who live.
Okay. Well,
it's not so.
Well, we call it semi-public, but well, it depends on the situation, I guess. If they do it this way, then it's maybe needed because it's not so well protected, not so safe for people to feel safe with children or with elderly people to be there if everybody can get in. I can imagine, but it's maybe something for bigger cities.
Yes, it's just for Kyiv as well, and it's not only for. It can be also. We have some living spaces not so far from here, and it also costs. But we also speak about this good architecture, like Danish one, like Dutch one, with the close territory. It's far away. It's just like sleeping area, and maybe it's not a lot of people around.
Then they understand.
Inconvenience as well.
Well, what I'm talking about in my city, because my city is not that big, 250,000 people, but in the heart of the city where I live now, we have this policy about having these kind of places closed at night, because it's very intimate, let's say. So it's closed at night, and during the day it's open. People can walk through, and people like to walk through because they like the architecture, they like to take pictures, and they like to take a rest because there are small places where you can sit.
Yes, it's a park.
Parks indeed, and it's a beautiful place. So it's maybe the Dutch way in the actual situation that it's possible to do it this way.
Maybe it's because of mentality. Can we speak about mentality?
I guess. Yeah. But in Amsterdam we have this beautiful park, Vondelpark.
Yes, it's
but it's also closed at night nowadays because too many people go there at night to sleep, take drugs. That's another kind of situation why they closed it, because it's a policy from a few years ago. Before that it was open all day.
Because they need to protect the park itself.
But also to keep it safe,
And what about, we're speaking about the public spaces close to the living residential? And what about the public spaces in the city, around the city? I guess we need them as well, not only with residential, but here as well.
Well, I worked on these public spaces in the heart of the city. When I started to work in the city in 1993, 1994, create new public spaces, but it will change every 30 years, let's say. And then there's a new policy of protecting more space for public to walk, and less space for cars, also less space for parking. So that's a new policy to create a better balance between the use of public space, more related to pedestrians and less related to cars. Cars are walk outside the city. You can choose if you would like to change into a bike or public space, public transport, or pedestrian. So that's a new policy to bring the car outside. Also the space in the streets. It's only one line for cars, and a lot of green spaces, trees, wide lines for bicycles. Very crowded nowadays with bicycles.
Yes,
Can you
it's-
imagine? So it's changing because of this policy. So they use, for instance, we had this Formula One in Zandvoort, a little village, Formula One car racing. For the first time, it was amazing to see that we were able in this very tiny, small village near the coast, we were able to bring in so many people. We tried to seduce them to use the bike, so park your car far outside and get the bike to the place. And we had a beautiful, huge parking place for bikes, and it was used. It was incredible. Also public transport, trains, there was every 5 minutes or even less, there was a train getting there. So the train company did a very good job. And of course there were also cars, but people know and knew that if they like to go by car, they need time to get there, and maybe they should be in time.
More time, yeah.
Yes, so they thought to themselves, if we really want to go by car, well, we should do this and we should take time. But many people find out a way how to get there. By bike, as a pedestrian, or by public transport. And it's beautiful to see that in such a short time, so many people were there and also got away afterwards together.
And about the public spaces, I just see a lot of new architecture on the road, and I see that libraries, it's a new kind of public spaces around the road.
Libraries?
Libraries, yes.
Okay, well,
It's not the old-fashioned libraries, just with the books and the same. It's if you see the examples of this architecture of libraries around the world, it's just huge public spaces with community for talking,
Yeah.
for reading, for
Yeah.
walking, so on.
coming
kids'
together.
place.
Yes, just for coming together, yes. And can it be that the libraries, it will be the part of the new public spaces just around the world? And what about the Netherlands?
Well, we have the same situation because people don't need to read books in the old-fashioned way to get it from the library and to take it home and then read it and give it back. Because
I like this word.
yeah, well, it's old-fashioned. I can imagine. Sometimes really good books I like to buy. I like to have it. But now-
Yes, but I need a lot of places to
Yes.
store it.
And that's the problem too. So you have only good books now. At least I do have, because in this apartment I don't have so much space for my books. I had to select. But nowadays, if you would like to read a book, a novel or something like that, you can also buy it electronically. So you have an e-reader to read the book. So you don't need the library anymore so much. But I know the guy who became a director of the library, he used to be a really good mine. And he also changed his policy. And I was organizing dialogues, like Q Cafe, when I started with. And I needed these kind of places. I needed, when I started, I used a small theater around the corner at my place where I live, in my village. And that was on Monday night because there was no theater on Monday night. It was like a Sunday in the creative world, closed. He said, if you are closed, I would like to bring in 100 people. If you give me the place for free, I will bring in 100 people to take coffee or beer afterwards. And they said, okay. So I got the place for free to use it. But nowadays you can use the library. And I did it in the end, in the beginning of the 90s, beginning of the 90s, the middle of the 90s, I used the library already. In the White Lady, no, it was 1999, because the White Lady was already in use in the library. And when my colleague became director, I said, I would like to use it for small dialogue, small at night. And he said, okay, we can arrange it. So, and then they had a coffee bar, a small one. And it's every day there are people sitting drinking coffee like we do here, and they get some magazines.
Say us is that there are no libraries in Netherlands because people don't read. We just immigrants are sitting there and reading something. How can it be? I don't believe you.
Well, two reasons, I guess. The first one is that the library is paid by the government, let's say. So it's national
Yes, yes.
service, and the government decided to bring less money to the libraries. So libraries had to close libraries in different parts of the city. It was crazy, but it was a decision of the right wing of our government. But on the other hand, the existing central library, the White Lady, there was this director and decided to try to focus on these new functions. So he had new people in his crew to guide this process. I guess the library in Eindhoven is doing very well. It's bringing these new functions, like I told you, coffee bar and things like that, and they do it very well. And it's not only about immigrants.
Does it exist now?
Yeah.
The library?
Yeah.
Is it public or just for
It's
the
public.
students?
Yeah, you
It's
can go
public,
there.
yes.
It's free. You can free entry. You can have your coffee, you can meet people.
Yeah, I have never been there. You need to go to see it.
It's in the White Lady in this connection where you can get right to the White Lady. First floor is the entrance of the library, because it's one of the 4 functions to change and to reuse the White Lady was the library. It was at the time 1994. The city had to bring in some new elements, and it was the city that decided to bring in the library as a function that the city paid for. So it made it possible to reuse the White Lady instead of demolishing it. Yeah.
But they're so small.
Yeah. We are.
They had great architecture. They have very great historical history. That's
We
why.
have smart technologies.
Technology, stars.
Well,
You told us about.
I showed you the picture of outer space, let's say, of Europe, and you see a lot of light exactly in our region. So
Yes.
a little bit of Germany, a little bit of Brussels and Belgium, and we spend a lot of light in the air. So for me, it's the negative aspect is that we spend light for free, let's say, in the air. So it's not so good. But on the other hand, it's also a sign of the energy or the economic energy that's in our region.
Yes.
That's why I use it for that purpose, to show that a lot of energy is in this part of Europe, in new technology, but also in investments. But we are a cozy, small country, and I guess we use it the right way, the balance between cities and nature.
Yes. The best balance, because it's not so good like in Ukraine that we have only maybe 3 cities. So the people need to go there to take money to earn something.
Yeah.
And the other villages and cities are without anything. And that's why we have the car traffic. A lot of people came here because from all over the Ukraine they're coming here to live here, and we have a lot of we have some trend now to have give people who live here have a lot of apartments for the rent. 10, 12 apartments for rent. And they rent to people who arrive here for the better life. And that's why we have so much problems, so many problems with traffic, with everything.
But I talked to a guy yesterday. But I said if you are smart, you try to find a solution to make the other part of the river attractive for people, not only to live,
just for living,
but you should also make it attractive for work. Let's say. I call it sexy urbanism. To make it sexy to be there. Then people don't have to take the car to go to the other side of the river or public transport. It's crowded, as I heard. So try to make it sexy, try to find a solution to create something beautiful at the other side of the river, that people decide to have their office or work there or at home. Because you have now this crisis where people need to stay at home and use it, I should say, to create something like the balance between living and working at the other side of the river. Show some examples, small ones, to show that it's better. You need no time to go into the car.
Yes.
So it's 2 hours a day at least, maybe more, and you can spend those hours at the place where you live.
Have you ever been to the other part of the world?
Well, I've been there, but going through, let's say. But when I got here again, I drove through. I followed our movements by car. And wow, they are building this like a circle of skyscrapers.
It's a forest.
Forest. Oh, yeah, forest.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah, I don't think it's the solution, but if you're able to combine it, like you were talking about, with, let's say, public space where people can meet, you can have not only living, but also ground floors, let's say, have some place where you can work or you can meet, have a coffee bar, have small offices. I guess it can be attractive again for people to start their office there. Because there's coffee around the corner, people go outside, you need to smoke or meet people, like we do here now. We go outside this hotel and we only have this place, that's okay. Good. Perfect.
Yes, I understand what it is, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine it too. But you should start small, you should show an example. Somebody should feel the need to do this.
Yes,
if you write about it,
yes.
if you write about it, maybe somebody sees it as an opportunity.
Also, we heard some interesting idea. We don't know about it. Want to ask you about it. About their architecture, maybe it's not for people anymore.
Architecture is not for people anymore.
Yes, that people need to be less in comfort, but create a new way of architecture where the person will not be the main one, and it will be just a part of some ecosystem of planet, maybe, something like this. This is the idea, because every time it was in old university, for example, for us in university architecture, that architecture is for the people. People is the main. And now we had some ideas that maybe it's not true. Maybe the architecture is a part of something global, and person is just a part. It's not the main one, and that's why maybe it's better for ecological. For example, there is some mushrooms. This way. That's a way of new food, new clothes, and so on. And maybe we need to try to live in peace with them.
Yeah.
To create a new way of life. Maybe it's less comfort for us, but maybe it's better for future. How do you think about this idea?
Well, I see architecture most of the time, it's not about aesthetics. People think if they use the word architecture, they think about aesthetical views or beautiful facades or something like that. I think architecture is like research in a way. Analysis, it starts with analysis. It sounds crazy maybe, but it's because it's not visible. But architects can be the people that can change the needs into a built situation. It could be urban planning, for instance. I'm not a real architect, I don't create facades, but I create an atmosphere in which people like to live, like to feel at home. So this way of analysis and be creative in offering solutions to be built or to be arranged. I guess that's also architecture. But and I don't know if you should use the word architecture, because an architect should be the guy who is